This is Lama Tantrapa, and I want to thank you for your interest in the secrets of Qigong Masters. You are at the right place if you want to learn from some of the best experts in our field how to tap into the energy resources that will help you achieve greater vitality, personal power, improve the quality of your life, and experience self-realization. I encourage you to dive deeper into these teachings by exploring the additional resources provided by this and other amazing guests of our show. Please visit qigongmasters.com, where you'll find a treasure trove of information and materials dedicated to empowering you to live your dreams. Today, I'm delighted to introduce to you, or perhaps reintroduce, Kai Van Bodhi, who is an acupuncturist in the state of California and a practitioner of Qigong for many years. Thank you so much, Kai, for joining us today.
My pleasure, Lama. It's always great to see you.
We decided that we would dive deeper today into the subject of breathing practices.
Yes.
And of course, breathing is one of the major components of Qigong, as well as Tai Chi and similar disciplines. Can you share with us a little bit about your approach to breathing and where you learned from?
Well, breath has always been a primary factor in my life. When I was born, I was premature 3 months, and one of my lungs didn't open fully. There's a chemical that we developed called surfactant, and that makes the bronchioles open. Now, I only had one lung, so I was on a respirator my first 3 months of life. And up until about age 6 or 7, I got pneumonia every year. So I knew what it was like to deal with breathing problems in my early life. And now, as I've become an adult and an acupuncturist and a Qigong practitioner, I really value the power of breath. So if we look at it on the simplest level, if you go into a hospital or an intensive care unit, 90% of the patients are on breath support. And so from the most fundamental level, if we can exercise our breathing when we're healthy, if we can expand our inhale and our exhale and our body's ability to extract oxygen, then we'll extend life. And so I really see breath skill, which is what Qigong is, as really life skill, just foundation of life. You can regulate your emotions, you can certainly affect your blood pressure. It's really the one thing that we've got to influence the body's unconscious things like heartbeat, blood pressure, through breath regulation. All those things can be influenced one direction or the other.
Very cool. So what I hear you saying is that you started practicing breathing before you even supposed to be born.
That's right. I started early and almost unsuccessfully.
So what was it that put you on a successful track, so to speak? How was your first steps in learning how to breathe consciously?
I don't remember, but I've seen pictures of when I was a kid. I had to blow into this and make a ball go up in a little machine. So I had to work on my exhale to get it to go out there. But what I really think helped me back then was that my older brother, who since passed away, he used to wrestle with me, even as a little kid. And when my mom would catch him, she would scold him. But I think somehow him wrestling with me and that playfulness, I think that kind of jump-started my respiration. You know, there was like a laughing, a joking, a playing. And I do have some memories of that.
Very cool. How old were you then?
I think that was all through my childhood up till like 8 or 9 years old. I was just constantly wrestling, and it helped me to become more of an athlete and toughen up a little bit. Yeah.
Very cool. So you started martial arts also pretty early, huh?
I did. Yeah.
So when you talk about your current breathing practice, that is probably fair to say interwoven into the other practices you do, what would you say specifically that you practice, and where did you get that practice from?
So my current breathing practice is mainly 9-breath method and variations of it. And I was first introduced to pranayama, or Indian breathing, where they tend to be less conservative. I was exposed to some of that early on when I was in Asia, in Taiwan. And I remember this one, he was a tantric Buddhist practitioner from Nepal, teaching a seminar in Taiwan. And one of the Chinese people asked him, it takes many years to feel qi in the lower dantian. And he said, it can take many years. And the student said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Do you want to feel chi in your lower dantian?" And everyone in the class was like, "Yes, yes, we want to." And these were mostly Taiwanese people, native speakers, not Westerners. And he put us through a pranayama where we were breathing in and out through the lower abdomen. We had our hands down here, and it was powerful. And pretty soon I could feel a tingling, a bubbling in my belly, and so could many of the other people. And he said, "There's chi in your lower dantian. It doesn't have to take 10 years."
Well, if there was no chi in their lower dantians, they wouldn't be alive to start with.
That's true. But to feel its activity and its function, you're right.
Yeah. So that was, how long ago was that?
That was probably 15 years ago.
Very cool.
16 years ago.
And you've been also involved in the exploration of the 9-breath method.
Yeah.
And I understand you got introduced to it by Jeff Primack.
That's right. Yeah, Jeff, I wouldn't be where I was without what Jeff has shared with me. The 9-breath method is probably the fastest, most specific technique that is accessible to any person. Within a few minutes you could teach it. It does a myriad of things, but for one, you can really feel warmth and tingling over your whole body, and it brings about a state of clarity in the mind.
It's interesting that anybody who's familiar with pranayama or most other types of breathing practices would say, wait a moment, this 9-breath method is like hyperventilation compared to the way that most other breathing practices suggest to slow your breathing down, to breathe abdominally, engage your diaphragms. This is like the opposite of that. Screw the abdominal breathing, forget about the diaphragms, don't even bother to breathe in deep because you don't have time for that. You're just pumping the air in and out like bellows. And then you are holding it in. Again, it's kind of like the opposite of what most breathing practices suggest.
It is, but I would make a distinction. And I think that's what makes 9-breath unique. It is, in some ways, the way that Jeff discovered it and teaches it, it is a marriage between pranayama and qigong. Because, there is the breath of fire, the...
Yes, or thunder breath.
Thunder breath. And I find there's value in that for stimulating peristalsis, getting the bowels moving. There's a benefit in that. But the 9-breath is
it's a little bit slower.
So it's a full inhale and a full exhale.
Well, there is no time really to inhale all the way. Like, I can definitely inhale a lot deeper if I don't do the 9-breath method as compared to what happens in the 9-breath method.
Okay, well, that's possible, and I'm sure as an advanced breathing practitioner, there's lots of variations. However, the way you control how much oxygen is coming in is by the sound that comes in through the nostrils. And so if I were to breathe quietly, yes, I'm stopping here because I'm upright in the technique, but I have more I could breathe in. But if I breathe at my full capacity, then I do reach an oxygen maximal level with the loudness of the breath.
I noticed that most of the function occurred at the top of the lungs, so probably the upper half of the lungs filled up really nice. I didn't see much movement in your abdomen, so the diaphragm didn't push the internal organs down to open up the lower half of the lungs.
Well, that's true. That's true, and that's why the second part of the 9-breath method is to drop the oxygen down. However, as most of us know, the lungs sit above the diaphragm.
Sure.
And that abdominal breath, while it does calm a person down, if you look at a professional athlete, when they're in their maximum performance state of the human body, they're not able to do abdominal breathing because the lung capacity, the lungs themselves, are above the diaphragm.
Yes, so the diaphragm contracts and relaxes to either squeeze the air out of the lungs or to open more volume.
Pull down and open more volume.
Yeah.
But the capacity's here. It's a paradox. So you're breathing in a way that looks like you might be playing football or getting ready to defend yourself. Or you're performing at a high level where it's not slow or easy enough that you can do abdominal breathing. That's true. But here's the difference, is that we're breathing like that in a chair, not having to expend any effort. And then, at the same time, we're instructed to relax our entire body. So we're breathing a very yang way, a very faster than what normal meditative breathing is. but we're doing it with the yin, the element of relaxation of facial muscles, of relaxing the whole body, letting the spine kind of ripple back and forth. So it is kind of a paradoxical technique in that way.
Interesting. So when it's done in the chair, obviously you can use the motion of the torso going back and forth. Do you always use the chair? Do you sometimes practice this in standing or perhaps lying down positions?
9 breath can be practiced all those ways, and it's beyond 9 breath. It's just about this powerful breathing practices. The one advantage to practicing in a chair in the beginning is it's easier to learn. Your legs aren't bound up on the floor; they're open, so the energy can flow freely. The joints are open, and 2, if you have any spinal issues, the chair allows you to maybe keep a straight spine without having to worry about. You could have a little support if you needed it. But it can be done standing once you've acclimated. Some people get lightheaded when they first start the technique, as is normal when you get increased oxygen in the blood.
Hyperventilation, essentially.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting discussion. I mean, in my understanding, hyperventilation has to do with, like, for example, there was a time in Western medicine where when you had a panic attack, they gave you a paper bag to breathe into. And that's the classic hyperventilation. So what they've got you doing is into the paper bag. And the CO2 builds up, and it would shut down the person's panic attack or emotional release. This is still different than hyperventilation. Because hyperventilate, so to vent is to release.
Oh, the hyperventilation with a bag is the breathing with a bag. Most hyperventilation happens to people when they are hyperexcited, stressed out,
right,
or in a fight or flight reaction. So they start breathing really fast and shallow,
right,
without any bag,
right,
without any CO2.
So this may be fast compared to meditating, but it's not shallow. A hyperventilating person, like, oftentimes in a hyperventilator, they're emphasizing the exhale. The inhale is very shallow, and the exhale is a little stronger. In this breath, at least, the inhale and the exhale are equal length. So I prefer not to compare this technique to hyperventilation. I think there's a clear distinction in the circular breath, all the way in, all the way out. Mm-hmm. And while it's faster than meditative breathing, again, it's not as fast as someone having a panic attack. It's not even close to that.
Very nice. So obviously it's not a meditative breathing, so the objective of this practice is not to experience meditation. What is the objective of the practice?
The objective has 3 parts, and one of them is in fact to go into deep meditation. The first part is to hyperoxygenate the blood. We've done some live blood analysis where a student of the school pricked the finger, looked at the analysis, and then did the technique and looked at it again. And you could see that the cells were less bunched up, as we would expect with increased oxygen in the blood. So the first part is to take in the extra oxygen. Then you hold, swallow it down, relax the shoulders, and you do a long exhale. And this is where often a deep meditative state arises. A point at which you could step off the technique and go into a standard meditation if you wanted to. Yeah. So it is meditation.
So it's like a prelude for meditation.
So one part is to oxygenate for health. Another part is to reset your mental emotional state.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I see the parallel between the relaxation technique that I teach and practice myself, and that is, since you cannot send the signals to relax to your muscles, because there is no physiological signal the central nervous system can send to the muscles to tell them to relax. The only thing it can do is to send them fewer signals of contraction. So what we do is we contract first, but do it consciously. Most people hold tension unconsciously, but if you do it consciously, then you can also consciously stop doing it.
Right.
And when you consciously stop doing it, and you no longer send the signals of contraction,
yes,
then you experience relaxation.
Yes. Yes.
So in a sense, it's kind of similar to...
And I would say there's 2 other similarities on the same note, that when you do this type of breath work, there's the possibility to do a long hold where you retain, and you will simultaneously see that after you hold the breath longer than you're used to, that next exhale is a deeper exhale than you've done, potentially. And that exhalation gets rid of stale air and CO2. And the opposite is true. My favorite technique is sublimation, where you take these more strong breaths and then you blow all the air out and you relax your posture. And you go into a deep state. There's just, the thinking is stopped. You know, it's stopped. And what you want to do with that is up to you. But again, end of that breath hold with no air, you take in a super deep breath. And some people that come to the classes, they'll have a block in their diaphragm, or the first day they'll say, oh, I can only breathe in my chest, or some of the yogic people only can breathe in their belly. But after doing this, both sides are open, both the lower and the upper.
Well, I remember the first time I was introduced to this technique, I had the most amazing pain in my diaphragm. My diaphragm was like screaming at me, what the hell are you doing? And I was like, oh, this is no big deal. It's just like breathing in and out intensely. Well, my diaphragm was not familiar with this type of intensity. So in a sense, it kind of went into spasm.
Right.
And so maybe this is a good reminder for our listeners and viewers. If you want to try this, do it under supervision of somebody who knows what he's doing, such as Kai, such as myself, such as Jeff Primack, and bazillion of instructors that he trained. So this is something that we definitely want to emphasize, that the safety in breathing usually is kind of overlooked.
Right, that's true.
And when people do reverse breathing, most of it is done in a very misguided fashion, so the safety is definitely an issue there. But this, well, it's not the 100% safe-proof technique.
That's right. It should be learned with an instructor. At the same time, I can remember when I read about negative ions, which, you know, there's a certain time in the morning where the ozone comes out of the earth, and that has powerful healing properties. There's ozone therapy. And there's something called negative ions, which are in forests and around waterfalls. And
during the storms.
And during thunderstorms. And I can remember as a kid, you know, wanting to, when I would get out there, I'd be like, wow, this is... And so while breathing techniques of this type of power should be learned under supervision, at the same time, the viewers can go out to a forest like we have here, you have here in Portland, or in Santa Cruz, where the air is clean, and they can just start to take deeper breaths, especially laying down on the earth, on a bed of pine needles, and just breathe and do it completely, full inhale, full exhale. And I think nature will take care of you.
And also some of those fit insides from the pine trees or redwoods. My favorite exercise, I would say, for breathing is smelling flowers.
Okay.
Like, just the other day, I was at the Rose Garden with my partner, and we were really thrilled to experience these thousands of rose bushes blooming all over the place, and just walking between them and sniffing all the different flowers. This is like a super breathing exercise without a particular form or counting the breaths. Now, when it comes to breath count, why is number 9 important? And I know that there is also 18, 27, 36. What's the deal with 9?
I think it's really just because the Qigong tradition comes from China, and China has a really beautiful and practical set of numerology. And the 5 elements relate to the numbers, and there's a type of acupuncture called magic square, but ultimately 9 is the most complete number.
Well, 8 trigrams, for example, or Basla is an important number.
That's
Why not
true.
8 breaths?
Okay, so 9, if you take the numbers 1 to 9, when you get to 10, it's 1 plus 0, which equals 1. That's starting over. So I'll give you a couple potential answers. One is that 9 is the most complete number without starting over. So if you do a set of 9 or 18 or 27, there's a sincerity in it. Second part, Chinese language is full of homonyms, words that have the same sound but different meanings. So 9, jiao. Jiao means to live long. It's the word for longevity. So there's this association with 9 and longevity.
So you don't want to do 4 breaths.
You definitely don't want to do 4. Yes, definitely don't want to do 4.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think it's the longevity, and I think it's also I think it also has to do with the completeness. And I'll give you one more. One of the greatest breakthroughs that I had when I was practicing Qigong, because you learn from different teachers, you learn different systems, and a lot of times you can be in a kind of a box. What I like about your teachings, Lama, is that you take people out of their boxes. You say, okay, you've learned all this, that's great. Let's apply this filter. How well is it working for you? How effective is it? Keep what you've got, but let's make it even more effective.
Let's test it.
Let's test it out.
Let's understand what the principle is underneath it, so that you focus on the principles and the essence of your art rather than form and fluff.
And that is Taoism. That is what the Chinese were good at one time. So there's a concept in Qigong that probably the viewers are familiar with: Jing, Qi, and Shen. Physical, energetic, consciousness, or spiritual. So somebody taught me it somewhere along the way. They said, Kai, any exercise you can do can be more Jing, physical, more Qi, breath or energy, or more Shen, more consciousness. And so I started to take the Tai Chi that I knew, the Qigong forms that I knew, and say, okay, what would the same exercise look like if I was emphasizing my body to strengthen ligaments and tendons, to really stretch, go into deep postures? What would it look like if it was just my breath? So it's a smaller movement, the breath is coordinated. And what would it look like if it was just my spirit? That's more visualization. And so you can take that and apply that to any practice that you've got. Take a movement and blow it out to its widest stance, following proper postural principles, deep stances, stretch tendons and ligaments. Then find a middle path and do your breath, and then you can find the most simple, softest, easiest, and use that for visualization.
Yeah, and Tai Chi we talk about a different frame, big frame, small frame,
medium frame.
Yeah. So,
what's your opinion on that? On the frame of the Tai Chi or the art that you practice?
My opinion is really simple. Beginners would be advised not to go into a big frame first, because it's too demanding in terms of the stances, in terms of all the movements. Easy to scatter yourself or overstretch. So starting with a middle frame is, I would say, an easier step. And then if you feel like exploring more in depth of those wide frame moves, for example, develop deeper stances, explore the full range of your motion. Fantastic, that's an important ability, to have full range of movement.
Yeah.
And then eventually it also requires understanding how to create movement that takes the least amount of energy and gives you the maximum result.
Right.
And that usually is a small frame movement where everything is integrated. There is the Qi flowing, the Fa Jing happening. Shen is acting upon your body, and your body is making minimal amount of action and achieving the greatest results.
I think it's funny because when I was a kid, I watched Kung Fu movies. And in the classic Kung Fu movie, you've got the scene of the master with one hand behind his back, just going like this, right? And the other guy can't hit him. And it is ridiculous to a degree. But when you train with some masters, some people that I've trained with in China and here, you realize that it's true. That you're, just like when we were pushing hands the other night, when you're exuding your greatest effort and they're using minimal effort because they've got that small circle trained in and they know how to get the result with the least effort. And I love thinking about how to apply that not only to my movement practices but also to my life outside of the dojo or the seminar or whatever. How can I get the best results in my life with the least effort, and be most harmonious, keep my center?
Mm-hmm.
That's something I always love to explore.
That's the principle of peak performance or high performance. How to achieve maximum results, spending least amount of energy and effort.
That's right.
Well, so if we know how to embody it through our practices, then we become a walking manifestation of this principle. Then wherever you go, there you are. You know how to walk the talk. So you don't just talk about how important it is to be at the peak. You actually perform at the peak level whenever you feel like it.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't even feel like performing at peak to you, because to you it may not be like a big deal. To other people it may seem miraculous because you're just demonstrating feats of power left and right. And to you it's like, Okay, that's pretty ordinary. So, how does breathing play into this skill?
I would say there's two things. One is that when you do any kind of regular breathing practice, then when you get out in the regular life, you have a better chance of maintaining a deep, rhythmic breath pattern. And that will affect your state of mind, your heart, in any experience, especially a stressful experience. So in one way, some of those things that to you are ordinary have come through years and years of training. And to other people, they're extraordinary. But it's only once you get on the other side and start to practice and experience it for yourself. So I'd say number one is that when you take time every day to practice breath work, you will find that your breath is easier to regulate, or it can even become unconsciously slow and deep, even in the midst of a difficult situation.
Right, and what's interesting is that first you're not conscious of how untrained your breathing is, and then you become conscious of how untrained it is, and then you consciously train it, and then you become unconsciously trained.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I love that model. That's very true.
Now, when it comes to exploring the benefits of breathing and Qigong practice in our daily lives, would you give us any examples of how it worked for you in particular, and maybe also some examples of something that didn't work?
Yeah. Well, I know a story. I remember a time that it really worked. I was doing a lot of meditating on my eyebrow center, on my heart, and on my lower abdomen. And I was exploring the physiology and the emotions that are associated with this. I was in school at the time. And
you're talking about acupuncture school?
Acupuncture school, yeah. And I was at dinner with my girlfriend at the time, and I had a beautiful plate of salmon and asparagus in front of me, and I was very hungry, and she said something to me, and it made me very anxious or jealous, and I don't remember exactly what she said. So I heard it go in with my upper dantian. I felt my heart rate accelerate, and then I felt my appetite go away. Butterflies in my stomach. And I remember thinking, okay, I'm jealous. I look at my plate, I'm like, wow, I'm not hungry in the least bit right now. And then I said to myself, wait a second. What if she didn't mean what I thought she meant? What if I'm reading into this situation? So I took a deep breath, and in my calmest voice I said, hey, did you mean this or did you mean that? And it turned out that what I thought she said, she didn't say. She didn't mean that.
So what did she say then?
Yeah, well, what she had said, it was totally nothing I had to worry about. And as I breathed into the new interpretation, I felt the recognizing of what it meant. My heart calmed down. I took a couple deep breaths, and my appetite came back.
Just like that.
Yeah, just like that. And I mean, mind-body connection, being aware of that. And I think, breathing practice, for example, if I go out late one night and eat late, and maybe the food's a bit heavy, when I wake up to do my morning meditation, I can feel that in my breath. I can't breathe as deep. I feel groggy, whatever. So when you have a breath practice, it's also great awareness and feedback in your daily life. And sometimes when you feel so good with breath, certain habits or dietary cravings, they fade away. Because you're like, I can feel this good on this food, why would I compromise feeling this good? So that's powerful too. It helps with addictive cravings.
And obviously, in addition to foods, just the way that we hold ourselves affects the way that we can breathe.
Yes.
So, for example, if you hunched over and slouched, your head hangs low, it's no posture for breathing.
That's right.
So you will have really hard time breathing, and if you keep holding yourself this way, you probably will be experiencing some respiratory issues.
That's
and a shortness of breath all the time. If, for example, you're holding up and feeling really self-important, well, maybe this also will affect the breathing, and you will not be able to breathe abdominally, and it will be a relatively shallow type of breathing. For example, if you are somewhat crooked, don't even have to have scoliosis, I call it holding out pattern of tension. Each of these patterns is associated with a certain state of consciousness. If you get stuck in that state of consciousness and you're just constantly holding out, keeping more weight on one leg than the other,
that's it.
one lung is going to be able to breathe,
Yeah.
the other one won't.
Yeah.
And so all of this obviously are the issues that prevent us from being able to breathe naturally.
Right.
Now, what's your approach to natural breathing? In other words, literally learning how to get out of the way of nature and allowing what's natural to unfold, manifest spontaneously.
It's a great question.
Because what can be healthier than being natural?
That's right. And I think that in my early training, what I struggle with, or what I would vacillate between, is there were teachers who were very loving, and they had a great spiritual message, and they didn't always have the best health or the best posture. And then I had other teachers that were more disciplinarian, and it was, you had to have this posture. There wasn't a lot of flexibility within that. And ultimately, the conclusion I've come to up until now in my life is there's a Chinese concept that encompasses it. It's called Wei Wu Wei. Most people have heard of Wu Wei, non-action. However, Wu Wei is part of a 3-word sentence that's Wei Wu Wei. That is action to achieve non-action. That's one way to interpret it. So what I think now with this question is like, is it naturalness or is it discipline? And I think that initially, when you come from an undisciplined state, where your posture has deviated, your breath has become shallow, your energy is low, it is going to take discipline to get your posture recovered, to bring back your organ function, discipline to eat healthier foods that you might need. But once you establish that habit, then there's it's going to become natural. What you're accustomed to is natural. Your vibration is going to go up. What you're willing to tolerate and the way other people treat you is going to change. But you may need a little effort to get there.
Well, discipline, as I know from surveying hundreds and hundreds of Qigong practitioners online, social media, on my website, it's number one problem that everybody
is up
experiences.
Okay.
Discipline, self-discipline, ability to engage in an ongoing practice in a consistent manner, finding time for the practice. These are the most crucial challenges that the majority of practitioners seem to be running against. How do you address that?
Well, I want to know your answer to how you address it.
Well, I coach people.
Oh, you coach people. So I do too.
I take them by the hand.
Yeah.
And I help them develop a coaching program that they resonate with. So we test to find out what exactly they resonate with, what exactly they want to experience in relation to where they want to experience, where are they now. So what would be the journey from where they are to where they want to be? What would be the steps leading along this path? And then coaching them to actually take the steps, make a commitment to it, and keep them accountable as to whether they take it.
Okay, so I have one last question about that, and then I'll give you my answer if you still want it.
Sure.
So when you contact a client or a coachee and they're off their steps that you've agreed on with them, so they're out of accountability, and you're there to hold accountability to them, how do you get them back into accountability? Is there one technique or many, or what would be the most useful way to bring them back into accountability?
Well, my favorite way is first to ask them, well, did you do what you set out to do? Last week, for example, you announced to me that you were going to take this step until the next time we meet. So have you taken it? And if the person says, no, I didn't take it, I ask them why. And when they tell me why, perhaps they come up with some good excuse, maybe sometimes they don't even have a good excuse, well then, of course, I look into the real issue underneath it. And once we find the real issue, then we look at the values associated with that which prevented them from taking the step that they said they would. For example, if they get distracted by something, what is the value in your value system of that thing that distracted you or derailed you from following your path? How does it compare with the value of being on your path?
Right.
Is it really important for you to follow this path? Maybe you were kidding yourself and me.
Yeah.
If you were kidding yourself and me, well, let's get real and seriously reconsider your value system. And once you reevaluate your values, then you know which values are most important to you. Then you will have no problem following that which is the highest priority. Now, if the value of that thing that derailed your progress isn't really that high on your value system, in your belief system. And it's just something that came up and momentarily distracted you. Well, then why was it more important to you at that moment? So in other words, we start looking at tough questions like...
Yeah, no, I can feel it's got weight, that kind of a question. Yeah.
And also it looks into the essence
Yes.
of why we do things that we do. So when the person really decides and clearly recognizes the value of following the path and taking the steps that they commit to taking, nothing derails them. Because now, whenever something else comes up, they remember, oh well, this is secondary or tertiary value as compared to what is really crucial for me. Then they don't get distracted. Even if they have a habit of getting distracted with those things, well, then it's just a matter of creating a new habit. And we of course, can work on that in the coaching process.
Okay.
And so that basically is my favorite answer to the question.
No, I like that, because what you're saying is that they're falling out of accountability with what they said they want to do is a behavior, it's a symptom. But you're going to go to the root, where's the value root that's causing it. And so for me, if you ask me that question, the only way that I've been able to develop and maintain a personal practice, and I think it's individual for me to a degree, one is teaching. As soon as I got to the point where my practice wasn't just about me, but it was about sharing the benefits with other people, that made me more accountable in my own practice. Mm-hmm. Because I'm not going to be in a class teaching something that is difficult for me. It has to be easy for me. So I'm motivated to practice. That's one. Two is, I don't know how you've been. I'm sure you've studied a lot of things. I've studied so many different Tai Chi forms and Qigong forms. I have forgotten more forms than I remember right now. And what I've recognized...
Which is good for you.
Which is good. Right, especially in your system, yeah. It's great. But I have kept concepts. But most of all, I have kept the practices that for two reasons. One, I love it. I love the way it feels. I know, even though it's a little painful or sore, that it's good for my posture or myself, or it just feels awesome. Mm-hmm. Second reason is because the teacher that I got it from is someone I love and care about. And I recognize the value of what they teach, and I want to stay in their good graces, and I want to go back and show them that I've maintained or improved what they've taught me. And that motivates me, because I see that as developed as I am, they are 10, 15, 20 years ahead of me in what they can do, what I can't push them, or 10 people can't move them, or whatever it is. And so that makes me keep up with certain other practices. So for me, it has to be fun. I have to enjoy it to be willing to discipline myself. That's not true for everybody.
Well, and one of the reasons why I developed the whole coaching methodology applied to Qigong and Tai Chi practices is that I realized that there is a distinct cultural movement associated with these practices. If you look at long-term practitioners, masters of these arts, they move differently from the beginners or people who have never practiced. What is it that's different about the cultural movement? It's as distinct as the cultural movement, for example, that you may observe different when you go to India as compared to Germany. Or people in Japan obviously move very differently as compared to people in Spain. So, comparing the cultural movement, as a cultural anthropologist, I kind of understand how to recognize and evaluate cultures. And so that basically allowed me to develop the concept of harmonious cultural movement, which is so harmonious, as name implies, that it's pleasant. Mm-hmm. So when you perform movements following these principles of the cultural movement that we're talking about, you feel great. You feel better than basically doing anything else. So then it solves the issue that basically bugs down most of the people doing any type of movement exercises or physical training. That's one of the reasons why people fall off the bandwagon almost as soon as they sign up for a health club membership in January or February of each year.
Yeah.
Why do they fall off the bandwagon? Because they don't feel good when they're doing those exercises. Those exercises are jerky start-stop movements that fighting against the flow. They require a lot of effort and don't really give them the sense of accomplishment. And they dread going back to the gym and doing the same stupid exercises again because it doesn't feel good.
Right.
So what do you do instead? Well, you learn how to move in a way that feels great. So you can't wait to do this again. And eventually it becomes your second nature. I would even say first nature. And so that each and every step you take on earth follows this culture movement.
I would say, because the topic of our talk today is breathing practices, I would say that one thing I love about these these less conservative breathing practices is that, at least for me, and this could, Tai Chi did not feel good to me at first. Not because there was anything wrong with the movement, but I was a football player. And I was used to angular, linear, powerful movements. I could feel my muscles get pumped up, and I liked that. When I learned Tai Chi, I'd say the first year and a half, I did not enjoy it at all. It was very frustrating to move that slowly. It wasn't until one winter time that I was practicing Tai Chi and I realized I didn't need gloves anymore. I didn't need the layers. It was the same temperature as it had been the winter before, but my layers were decreasing. And I started to get these moments of deep peacefulness. But it took me a long time. In breath work, especially the kind of breath work that I practice now, I can give somebody a blissful experience in 5 minutes, where they feel their mind is clearer than it's been, and they feel some positive sensation of tingling or warmth or happiness in their body. And because it's enjoyable, they're going to want to go back and do it. And because it doesn't take a lot of time. That's least effort for greatest result. So anyway, just bringing it back around to that. Yeah.
I really like that. And I also like the parallel between the breathing practices that you just shared with me and Tai Chi practices that both led to, at least one of the benefits was feeling warmer when it's cold outdoors. It kind of reminds me of Tibetan practice of Tummo, or a generation of inner heat.
Yes.
I know that Jeff Brymack studied a little bit with
Wim Hof.
Wim Hof,
Yeah.
The Iceman.
Yeah.
Are there any techniques in this 9 breath or similar practices that you learned from Wim Hof directly?
Yeah, I spent 5 days with him.
Uh-huh.
And the culmination of the seminar was to go into a walk-in freezer in a restaurant in just shorts. And I'll tell you, if you know Chinese medicine, I'm a yang deficient person. I like warm food, I like warm spices, I always have my socks on, and I know that was super powerful for me to be able to go into a walk-in freezer for 17 or 18 minutes in my boxers and really be aware that there was cold but not feel cold. And so that is the Tummo. Now, it was quite similar to what I had learned from Jeff before, but there was just the main difference was that Wim uses sublimation. So he's taking hundreds of breaths in a row, and then and he totally collapses his posture, and he's gone, he's out for a long time, counting pulsations in his abdomen, the vagus nerve, the beat of the heart through that central column, and then he takes a deep breath in, holds it, and he focuses on warmth and energy meeting the cold. And so it's part technique and it's part paradigm shift.
Yeah, and it's obviously a mind over matter kind of technique because it uses visualization and
it does.
Body awareness. Is this something that can be used in any climate, or do people from warm climates are better off without taking this particular step in practice, or how does it work?
Okay, I can tell you from my experience, it works in the cold. It works to go into cold water, into rivers, and really feel the purity of that. However, when we did the training with Wim, because we were in Miami, we went out to a tennis court, and the tennis court was uncovered, and we went out in the afternoon, and we got barefoot, because Wim said the technique works equally well for hot. However, I did not experience enough proficiency to use it in the hot. So what he did is we took off our socks and shoes, and we walked in circles on the tennis court. And I mean, there were people that got burned. They got blisters on their feet. Wim walked like it was the perfect day and there was no heat in that floor. So his mind-body control is at a truly high level. There were a few of the practitioners of us that were able to do it, and I wasn't able to really enjoy the laps around the court. It was really like walking on coals.
Yeah, have you done that?
I have not done that. But anyway, he was able to do it, and there were certainly members of the group that grasped it. Yeah.
Cool. So, in other words, these practices can be applied to a variety of environmental conditions. It's not about heat or cold, it's more about development of Wei Qi. In other words, this sense of being protected without protecting yourself, being protective.
Yes. It brings back a memory when I first went to China and I really knew nothing. I remember one of the Qigong teachers that I met and talked with in my travels. He would wear a button-down shirt and a sport jacket, like a suit jacket, and he wore that whether it was 95 degrees in the summer and he wore it in the winter. And I never detected body odor on him. He was never cold. He didn't wear a North Face jacket like me in the winter. He's same clothes all the time, no body odor. And
did he own any other clothes?
He may not have owned any other clothes. But regardless, his Qigong was saving him some serious dry cleaning money. But and you start to realize those things. I mean, it really is worth talking about. And I'm curious to hear your opinion. It seems to me that there are two paths in Qigong and self-cultivation. There's many, but you could divide them into two. There's a water path and a fire path. There's this path of slowly getting better over time with just relentless devotion to your practice.
Yes, the baby steps.
Yeah, and daily work and the gong fu. You do it every day. You polish the mirror every day. Mm-hmm. Wax on, wax off. Mm-hmm. Daniel-san doesn't know why he's doing it, but he's getting better. Okay, so this is that water path. It's silent meditation. It's holding post. It's these practices that overflow you from the bottom up. But then there's a fire path. Focus on the microcosmic orbit. This acupoint, then this one, then this one, then this one, and you can open a strange flow in the body and manifest psychic abilities. And I'm not making light of that path. I believe those things are possible. But that path is faster. It's more mind-based. And it's more dangerous, potentially, because if you send your chi in the wrong direction before it's ready to go there, you might injure an organ or become unstable in your consciousness. What's your viewpoint on those two paths, or do you see a potential integrated path that's in the middle?
Great question. There's a variety of practices that cannot really be developed to a reasonable level without taking baby steps. But there are some where you can take a shortcut or two. And usually the people who take shortcuts or they try to take shortcuts are the ones who are impatient, who say, what, maybe I don't want to wait till the next lifetime to experience enlightenment. I want it now.
Yeah.
And also maybe there is a certain degree of arrogance saying, what, those stupid people who have nothing else to do in their lives, they should take years and decades doing this baby steps. I'm going to take a shortcut. I'm going to hack the system. Now, again, I'm not taking a swipe at this particular approach just because I think it's wrong. I think this is a viable approach if you know what you're doing, if you understand why this shortcut actually will lead you to the goal that you aspire to achieve, as opposed to that shortcut is going to lead you to a dead end. And on the other hand, it's also great to have discipline. So if one shortcut didn't work out and you ended up in a dead end, you're not going to be beating yourself over the head or just get so discouraged that you quit.
Right.
You basically persevere despite the fact that maybe one shortcut didn't work out. And it's great to be able to take shortcuts whenever it's possible, because I know that there are plenty of practices where you're not just going on a long route. You are actually taking a spiral route that can be very nicely a shortcut if you just manage to cut between the loops of the spiral.
Okay.
The question is how to do this with such degree of precision and mindfulness that you don't hurt yourself, you don't overwhelm yourself, and also you don't develop the sense of ego. I'm going to hack the system all the way.
Right.
So yeah, basically there is a balance that I would be looking for, and this between these approaches too.
I remember this one night, I was in China, and I was on a college campus, and it was a bamboo grove, and we were all doing standing meditation. And that night was summer, and the mosquitoes were biting, and you're standing and you're breathing. And my teacher was sitting on the steps behind all of us. There were only 6 or 7 of us at night, and I came out of my meditation because I felt like it's just crazy for me to be here with these mosquitoes. And I thought to myself, like you said, it's the natural way, is the easy way, it's the effortless way. So I sit down with my teacher and I said, Yang Laoshi, why is it so hard? If these are the natural ways, if Tai Chi is natural and stillness is the natural state, why is it so hard? And he looked at me, and I was worried I was going to get criticized for not being in the standing practice. He thought I would be getting out of it or something. But he really gave me a beautiful answer. He said that in old times, like when the Yellow Emperor's Classic was written, that even then they recognized that society had deviated far from nature. We weren't our hunter-gathering ancestors anymore. Even then, they were eating foods that were less natural. They were eating too much, having sex too much. They were living in very pampered conditions, even 3,000 years ago in China.
Well, 0.5% probably was living in pampered conditions.
But remember that the Yellow Emperor's Classic is a discussion between the emperor and his top doctor. And there was the whole feudal society that lived within the emperor's walls. Anyway, he said even then they recognized that the further we deviate from nature, which is what gives us our health and our power, the harder and more strange the practices will seem.
Yes, so in other words, we're learning how to become natural again.
That's right.
If you did this from a very young age, and most of us are pretty natural at a very young age of 3, 4, maybe 5, there would be no problem at all. By the time you go to school, you already learned a few unnatural steps, and education is going to solidify the unnatural ways of being and relating to people. And so then you have to basically relearn how to be natural, relearn how to be spontaneous, which is kind of a paradox. Learning how to be spontaneous, right? But what's interesting about it is that back when the Tao Te Ching was written purportedly by Lao Tzu, about 2,500 years ago, Lao Tzu was making references to the sages of the old days who were living in peace and harmony with nature. Nowadays, he was bemoaning how everybody is living in a hurry and forgetting the natural ways. Now, go further back, 2,500 years earlier, the Yellow Emperor Classic is talking about the same thing.
Yep.
Now, I bet that if we had access to some earlier writings, they would be doing the same thing. So in other words, the older generations purportedly lived in greater harmony with nature than the later ones. Now, what does it tell you about the evolution of human species?
Yeah, it sounds like we're not headed in the right direction to me. But
what would the practice of Qigong and breathing and other practices you're involved in contribute to evolution of human species in the right direction?
I think that the most fundamental principle that I appreciate from it is that when your emotions and state of happiness are dependent on things outside your control, the behaviors of your employer or your lover or your partner, when those things need to be a certain way for you to be happy, then you're going to be a victim. No matter how you spiritually bypass it or what you say about the law of attraction and manifesting, if your happiness is dependent on those things arriving, then you're likely in 2015 to be not happy a lot of the time. And so if you find a mind-body practice that when you do it and you finish it, you are full. You feel better than when you started. You're more content, more happy. And that doesn't depend on anyone. All you need is a space and a mat and the time. If you can have that in your life, then you can be counted on more by people. You will be more likely to keep your own counsel in terms of be self-guided, which is a key to happiness. Even in the world of psychology, people who are guided from within are much happier than people who are dependent on without.
Intrinsically motivated.
Intrinsically motivated, that's right. Internal locus of control. You have a better chance of healing a chronic disease, all of that. And ultimately...
Because self-healing is what healing is all about.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So anyway, I think if you find a mind-body practice that you love, it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to have all the bells and whistles. It just has to work for you. And you do it every day, your life is different and better. And not only that, but I meet a lot of housewives and caretakers and therapists, and they're saying, I don't have time for my own practice. I'm too busy taking care of other people. Well, that caretaking will come to an end if they don't fill their own cup.
So when you said that as long as you have time and a mat and space, then you are set to be able to do the practice. Well, like you just also mentioned, people often don't have at least one of those components, the time, and sometimes also the space, and sometimes they have no mat. So in that case, what
those are metaphors for the simplest thing. I mean, I would challenge that any person can wake up even 15 minutes earlier. With some of the breathing techniques that are out there, or a simple yoga sequence, or Tai Chi, Qigong, there's so many options, and they range from 5 minutes to 45 minutes or to an hour. So I think I would challenge that everyone has 5 minutes upon waking to either go outside on their porch or go into the bathroom or go somewhere with fresh air ideally and do some centering and breathing. And then that 5 minutes every day over time will, like water, start to erode the structure of their life in a positive direction. Break away the old patterns and limited breathing. Yeah. Ideally, though, the mat and the space and the time are nice, but I think everyone has it. Yeah.
Well, and the funny thing about it is that people often say they don't have enough time to practice, to which I say, well, how much time do you need? And most people say, well, I need at least 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Some people need an hour to practice. And then I say, well, what if you could compartmentalize your practice into smaller chunks? So what if you, for example, practice a little bit of standing here and there throughout the day? You don't have to stand for an hour like a tree, when you can spend 5 minutes standing here, so 5 minutes standing there, that adds up. It actually has cumulative effect. You may find standing more than an hour throughout the whole day if you count all the little times. How about breathing? You don't have to dedicate 10, 15, 20 minutes to breathing practice in one solid chunk because you're going to be breathing throughout the day anyway.
Yep.
How about integrating breathing practices in small increments throughout the day? Because it actually creates the habit. Yeah. It infuses the quality of consciousness and mindfulness that we're talking about into your daily life.
Yes. There's an app for the iPhone and for all the phones. It's called Mindfulness Bell, something like that. And you can just set it in the background, and you can set it every hour or twice an hour, 3 times an hour, and you just get this beautiful Tibetan bell. And then when you hear that, you stop whatever you're doing and you take a few mindful breaths. It can be 5, 10, 15 breaths, whatever you want it to be. And I found that when I started to put that on in the background, especially when I was working from home, I was way more productive.
Yeah.
If I had been off task, it was a moment to catch my breath, to slow down, and I would come back on task. If I was in my task, I would get fresh insight when I took the break.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, there's little things like that. I agree with you, Lum. I really appreciate that you are willing to deviate from tradition, which says you must practice 45 minutes, and to get people the benefit that's available. I really see what you and I have devoted our life to. They are ancient healthcare technologies. And I call it a technology because when a lot of people see martial arts or breathing or qigong or yoga, they see it as a religion or as something only for new age people. But it's actually a health technique that works. You don't have to have a certain spiritual belief to take advantage of slow breathing or mindfulness and improving posture or stretching ligaments and tendons. All of this is physiology, it's anatomy, it's psychology, it's all science-based. It can be expressed in that way.
Well, speaking of psychology, of course, you just mentioned a couple minutes ago about the internal locus of control and how people who are intrinsically motivated are much more likely to benefit from self-healing practices. So in a sense, it does depend on the belief system to some extent, because if the person doesn't believe that the locus of control of their lives is within themselves, they delegate the responsibility to the powers that be, which are somewhere out there, and they pray to them and they ask for help and they wish that something is going to descend upon them and help them out. They are relegating the powers and basically robbing themselves of that which belongs to them. How would you say the spiritual aspects of your life affected your practices, and also how did the practices affect your spirituality?
Well, for one, I think that I experience things through breathing techniques, like laying down, breathing, and sweating through my clothes. When I sat up from the first time I did a really powerful breath practice, I was able to sit in half lotus, where normally my hips wouldn't open wide enough to sit in half lotus. And I was struck with tingling and vibration. So one, that breathing practice, which I did blindly, just followed the instructions, like relegating my locus of control outside myself, it yielded an internal experience that gave me increased motivation, faith even, in those practices. And also the human body as an energy system. So I said in one way, you can yield your locus of control, follow a system or a technique to awaken things within you, and then let that change you or move you in whatever way.
What would be the final words of wisdom, as it were, for our viewers and listeners from you today?
I would say find a practice you love, a mind-body practice that you love, practice mindfulness in your life, and know that you're worth it. Have fun. There is a practice out there that's fun, because as we all live longer, I'm going through with my father right now, it can be a long, hard path as we age. And if we can incorporate our mind-body practices in our 30s, 40s, and 50s, then our 70s, 80s, and 90s will be full of a higher quality of life. And that's what I would want for people.
And our 30s and 40s and 50s will be higher quality.
Of course, of course, yeah, yes.
So. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Kai.
Thanks, Lon.
I really appreciate you sharing with us today. You have finished another episode of the talk show, The Secrets of Qigong Masters, that brings to you some of the top experts in Qigong, meditation, healing, and martial arts. Now I invite you to visit QigongMasters.com and dive deeper into the teachings of our amazing guests by downloading their multimedia products and becoming a member of our international community of like-minded people. The show is also brought to you by Academy of Qidao, offering Qigong coaching programs that integrate the ancient energy arts with the modern methodology of coaching. If you struggle with chronic pain, suffer from too much stress, want to boost your performance, or seek spiritual awakening, please go to QigongCoaching.com. There, you can receive top-notch coaching as well as professional training to become a certified Qigong coach yourself. That's right, if you're dreaming of making a decent living, doing what you love, and making a difference in the lives of many people worldwide, check out our programs that will help you transform your interest in energy arts into living your life in the flow.